Coming up on a Tuesday edition of Morning Drive, President Donald Trump reportedly threatened to sue the USGA if this week's U.S. Women's Open was moved from his course in New Jersey. Our insider has the latest from the grounds at Trump National, Bedminster. Plus, the LPGA's third major is just days away. We take a look back at the top moments in U.S. Women's Open history. And as we look ahead to next week's Open Championship at Royal Birkdale, what are some of the biggest hitters in the game doing to prepare for a chance at the Claret Jug? It's time to rev it up. Morning Drive starts now. And a very good morning to you. This is Morning Drive, and this is Studio AP. Gary Williams, Paige McKenzie, Amanda Blumenhurst. It's U.S. Women's Open Week. We have to have experts who played in the competition, and there's a lot going on up there.
That's right. There is. We'll get to that in a second. But it can't be bad for you to be sitting next to a couple ladies. We got Bailey in a minute.
Oh, it's great.
Charlie, don't come back.
Charlie, stay in Tahoe. That's fine. We're good. We're all good. You know who else is good? It's always good to live back great memories. Well, here's Justin Rose a week in advance of the Open Championship, reliving a moment 19 years ago from the spot in which he holed a shot as a 17-year-old. He was the story of the week. Marco Miller, with all due respect, won the Open in the Claret Jug. But this kid stole the show. He was 2 shots out of the playoff.
I remember that shot more than I remember who won the golf tournament, to your point. I think as a young player in this game, I so related to Justin Rose. There was something so relatable about that smile as he walked the fairways. I think back to the most memorable memories as a kid growing up. And I remember Kuchar at the Masters. I remember Justin Rose at the British.
Right.
I know, it's so exciting. And it's great, too, that he's reliving it.
Yes.
You know, that obviously it's been really important to him, too. He plays that memory back in his head, and then he goes and hits that shot again. And maybe not the same result, but I'm sure the same feeling.
Cool.
He was a delightful kid. He's a delightful grown man now. Now, what is happening now? Well, USA Today reported yesterday that President Donald Trump threatened to sue the USGA if they moved this week's U.S. Women's Open from Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, which is owned by the Trump Organization. The USGA released a statement last night saying, quote, as a matter of policy, the terms of our contracts with championship host sites are confidential, and accordingly, the USGA will not comment. We are excited that our U.S. Women's Open Championship Week has begun, and we are focused on providing the ultimate test of golf for the best female players in the world. And for more on this news, we welcome in senior writer at golfchannel.com, Randall Mell on the phone. Randall, good morning.
Good morning, Gary. Good to be with you.
Well, it's good to be with you. It's Tuesday, and it's already been a very eventful week. With respect to the USGA and this, does this come as a surprise to you? Because really there have been whispers about this for months.
Exactly. Yeah, we've suspected it and been hearing about this. But, you know, credit to Christine Brennan at USA Today for getting a source strong enough to allow her to report it. You know, guys, still, you know, say that we don't have maybe enough context to understand exactly how it unfolded, you know, how much the USGA was pushing to move the event, or how quickly, you know, they may have relented after hearing the word lawsuit. But if this happened, Gary, it shouldn't come as a surprise, because back in July of 2015, when Donald Trump, the candidate, was under fire for inflammatory comments about illegal Mexican immigrants. Remember, you know, LPGA Commissioner Mike Wan released that statement saying, you know, where basically he wished the Women's British Open could be moved away from Trump Turnberry. But, you know, there wasn't, if you remember, he said there just wasn't enough time. There was like 3 weeks. So, and he also said that, you know, that didn't suggest support for Trump, that they were going there. And Trump just blasted him in that letter. And remember, in that letter, Trump said, quote, Mike Wan, remember, I'm an A+ at contracts, and there's, quote, an absolutely binding contract to play at Turnberry. So, this whole thing kind of unfolded with Mike Wan and LPGA and the Women's British Open in Turnberry. It shouldn't surprise us.
Okay, the practical effect on the championship this week, with all that's going on and the suggestion and the provisions being made in the event that the President of the United States shows up, what are they doing? We all read about the FAA notice to pilots that, made it clear that it's possible the president could be flying in the weekend. But I also talked to Shauna Thomas at Ultraviolet, the women's group that's preparing to protest here, and she told me that the permitting for them to protest was so rigorous, and that security measures, she said, were at, quote, a presidential level. So it was real clear to her that they're preparing. So much so that, they flew that banner over the U.S. Open in Erin Hills, the Dump Trump banner. She said they won't be flying that because the airspace is restricted. And the last time Trump visited here, when he visited here in May and June, both those times the airspace was restricted for 10 miles. So just another sign that, Mr. Trump very well may be here. President Trump very well may be here. Well, Randall, your piece at golfchannel.com, if people really want to understand the details, you use the word provisions being made in the event that the president does show up. I would recommend people go there. There's a lot in there. Thanks so much. Enjoy the day.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
Okay. And with that, let's bring in our insider, and that is Tim Rosefort. Tim, I know you've communicated with some people as well. What are you hearing about the likelihood that the president may show up at the U.S. Women's Open?
Gary, I talked to a high-placed source in the Trump organization yesterday who told me it was very likely that the president would indeed attend the Women's Open. After all, it is not only his golf course, but it is his summer home. But just a point of context and perspective here, I covered the senior PGA up at the Trump golf course in the Washington, D.C. area. First he was coming, then he wasn't coming, then he was coming, then now we're Sunday morning. The Secret Service returned after leaving the golf course. The motorcade was ready to go from the White House, and then it started raining and the plug was pulled on that. So with Trump, you never know. But in this case, very likely, seems like it's very likely.
All right,
Gary.
Tim, thank you. We'll have more notes with you coming up in a moment. Let's get to the championship. We want to focus on the players. And, of course, we know that Brittany Lang is your defending champion. She defeated Anna Nordquist last year in a 3-hole playoff for her second career LPGA win, her first major championship. And you consider the Americans are having a good year. And you look at Lexi Thompson well ahead of the rest of this field, but all very, very good players, likely to represent the United States on the Solheim Cup team. So she's a third-ranked player in the Rolex rankings. You go down to Brittany Lang, who is, as we just mentioned, the defending champion. Michelle Wie has won this championship. So how about a little state your case for Paige and Amanda? Paige?
I'm happy to do this because
I know you are.
Michelle Wie is back in the spotlight where she belongs, rightfully, after a successful start to her season. In fact, if you take a look at recent results leading into this major championship, there's a good case for her to continue that good play moving into this week. But more than just all of these great finishes, you can see top to bottom, third, second, fourth in 3 of her last 4 weeks moving into this major. We've seen a lot of changes with her putting. And what we've seen is them pay off. We saw a different grip in February, a different grip in March, a different grip in April, and then recently we're seeing 3 different grips in the same tournament.
In the same round.
Exactly. But I like what we're seeing top to bottom within her game, not just the putting. She's improved from 120th in putts per green regulation from last year to 19th this year. And on top of that, every single statistic from driving accuracy, greens and reg, and putting have improved over last season.
Well done, Counselor.
I love what we're seeing.
You stated a heck of a case, Counselor. All right, you, Amanda, who do you got?
All right, I've got Lexi Thompson. She is just a phenomenal golfer. Top to bottom, she has, like Michelle, she has that major under her belt, so she doesn't need to go for that, oh, I haven't won a major yet. She's won 8 times in her short 6 years on tour, 1 already this year, and really after that, contentious, the second place finish at ANA. She has come back firing hot with 1 win and 2 second place finishes. She's had 4 runner-up finishes this year, 7 top 5s. She leads the tour in scoring average with a 68.85, and just in the 12 events that she's played. So she's just playing such phenomenal golf. She's one of the longest ball hitters on tour, which with a USGA event, they stretch these golf courses out, and she is 3rd ranked in distance, but then also in driving accuracy. She is also driving the ball very accurately, 68% of fairways hit, which actually is very high, and she is playing great golf right now in this last stretch. So she's playing hot, and I like her chances.
I would just like to point out, Christy Kerr, if you're having breakfast in the clubhouse before you practice today, I got you, okay? Because these two probably just made you a little feisty with your 2 majors and 19 wins. We're going to have the top 5 moments all time that we will unveil a little bit later on. What else is happening? Well, the guy is looking to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is Bernhard Langer. He is the defending champion who will try to add his 2nd major victory of the season by winning the Senior Players for the 4th consecutive year. And with that, we send it down to the simulator. As we look at his numbers in this event over the last couple of years, look at that greens and regulation. A brutal tied for 10th, but the last 2 years, 1st and 1st. And you add putting average, it's just, that's why the guy is so hard to beat. Travis Fulton, one of the best instructors. Travis, I wish, as you're going to dive into Bernhard Langer over the years, that we could crank up a little David Bowie changes.
That's right. He has made some changes. You know, Bernhard turned pro in 1972, and since that time, 106 professional wins, incredible run. And he's made some changes through that process to what I think has become now his best ball striking, perhaps, of his career. Great footage here on the left. This is from 1981 back at the Open Championship. And then, of course, 2017 on the right. And the first change that Bernhard made was his grip. And we're going to bring in a couple lines here to help you see this. His left-hand grip back in the day was very strong. His V's would work way over towards his right shoulder. And you can see here in today, in 2017, it's a little more neutral, say, right ear. And what's interesting is when he made that grip change, his grip was way over here. He would just incrementally bring it back. He didn't do it all at once where he just went from strong to neutral, but he did it very slowly over a period of time, which I thought was interesting and something to consider at home if you're making a grip change. Now, that grip change kind of put his changes in motion. Back in 81, you're going to see the club go way inside. He would take it inside the face, very shut. A lot of knee bend. Look at that right knee. You can see his spine kind of going down, and he had a lot of right bend, which I'll show you here in a second. Now, let's go to 2017. The club much more out in front of him. Right knee, going to straighten up a little bit, still has a little bit of flexion there in the right knee, but much more stacked up. His legs much more underneath his spine. You'll see that here as a result with the spine angle. Watch this. We're going to bring these lines in. You can see more right bend here back in 1981. A lot of that because of the knee bend and how the hip turned. And then here you can see a little less of that, a little more straight up with his hips and his legs supporting that more underneath him, and I like that. Now, we're going to take it to the finish here. Watch this back in 81 here. You would really work the legs, swing it down from the inside, and get into this reverse C look that we saw so many players back in the day. And Bernhard actually had quite a bit of lower back problem. If you want back problem, then hang back like this with right bend. That's no good. And when you see Bernhard now, watch this. He's going to be much more on top of the golf ball. And as he swings to the finish here, watch the spine angle. Once again, we're going to bring those red lines back in. It's going to be more straight up and down with less side bend off to the right. So a grip change over time. Got his legs much more underneath him here. And then a little more of a finish. He likes to keep that right shoulder out in front and stacked up to eliminate that pressure on the lower back. Significant changes, Gary, but still winning over and over again on PGA Tour champions.
You're exactly right. The one thing that hasn't changed, his body weight is probably exactly the same. All right, what else is happening now? 4 spots in the Open at Royal Berkshire are available this week through the Open Qualifying Series. 1 spot at the John Deere Classic to the leading player not otherwise exempt who finishes within the top 5 in ties, as well as 3 spots at the Aberdeen Asset Management Scottish Open to the leading players not otherwise exempt who finish in the top 10 and ties. And for more on the Open next week, we bring him back in, the insider, for some notes to start this Tuesday. And let's start with 2 guys who have won the last 2 U.S. Opens. There's so many similarities to Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka, personality-wise, physical makeup, power, and it's like they're drafting off each other. And yesterday, Brooks Koepka, who works out with the same guy that Dustin Johnson does, they posted a photograph. This is good motivation. When you have a trophy like the U.S. Open and you bring it in to where you work out, that's a keeper right there.
Sure is, but the party, I think what this indicates is another sign that the party's over for Brooks and also DJ as well as it relates to peaking for the Open Championship. DJ and BK are basically wanting the same thing, and that's well, they want to be the #1 player in the world. And,
right.
You know, Brooks wants to get there. He's 11th right now. He was mentioning to Joey D yesterday, this is the closest he's ever been to #1, that it may have been easier to jump from 1,459th in the world when he was playing a Challenge Tour in 2012 to where he is now than it will be this final trek from number 11 in the world. He dropped one slot yesterday to #1. It'll be interesting to see if he's got the firepower and also the putting ability to do over this next segment of time what he did at Erin Hills.
And very quickly, their preparation, I mentioned them drafting off each other.
Yep.
They work exceptionally hard in the gym. Do they not?
They do. And as a matter of fact, Koepka has called DJ his mentor as it relates to this, and it's sort of an example of how hard you have to work. But over the course of the last month out in California, where he's doing 2-a-days with Wayne Gretzky and going to Soul Cycle twice a day, now back in Florida on the Versa Climber in between reps, you see an uptick as it relates to DJ and how hard he is working at this point in time. I think he feels the drafting coming, and he doesn't want to give up the #1 ranking, certainly.
Okay. Sebastian Munoz, he had a disappointing Sunday, but he got a great consolation prize. He's going to be in the Open. Now, with respect to him putting, the first 3 days, he made everything.
362 feet of putts.
And there's a residual effect that happened to him that might have produced that great putting. What was it?
Well, Wednesday, the day before the opening round up at the Greenbrier, he went out to fish with Gonzalo Fernandez Castaño, and that led to a practice round, and then ultimately, here they are in the morning fishing, led to a session on the putting green there. Gonzalo 6th in strokes gained going into the tournament last week before he missed the cut. And it was quite a simple lesson, Gary. It would be basically this kid Munoz was looking at the putter as it went back and threw the ball. He wasn't concentrating on the ball. It was the quickest lesson Gonzalo ever gave, and just look at the front of the ball, focus on the dimple, and the rest of it was done within 10 putts. He made all 10, and he walked off the golf course, and then he never stopped really making putts until Sunday when he was down. The pressure was on. He was down to 32 putts. It'd be interesting to see if he can keep this going forward. He's in the Open. He made a big move in the FedEx Cup standings, and here's a kid who gets into his country's Open, the Web.com event down in Colombia, wins that to get status on the Web.com, and then turns that into maybe a PGA Tour card. A lot of momentum, obviously. In fact, he's going to play his first Open, and if he follows the same game plan as he did last week at the Greenbrier, he's going to turn his cell phone off, turn off all social media, and just focus on what he was doing.
All right.
Go Gonzo on the greens.
Very good. More from him coming up a little bit later on, but for now, let's say good morning to Bailey Mosier. Bailey?
Good morning, Gary. Yes, it'll be Munoz's first Open and first ever major championship. So he is gearing up for the Open, as is everyone else, the men's third major. And Golf Channel, as we gear up for that, we are rolling out a several-part series called The Men in Blazers. It's an off-the-wall look at the Open through the eyes of two Premier League broadcasters. They are taking us behind the scenes of Royal Birkdale to see it like we have never seen it before. And speaking of off the wall, the Home Run Derby was last night, which some of you at home probably were watching. And while you were, did it ever occur to you that swinging a bat and hitting a driver are the same thing? Yeah, me neither. But one World Long Drive champion whose dad played Major League Baseball, well, he does say that they are the same. More on that is coming up later today. And while we're comparing things, Travis Fulton is here to compare the attack angles between the best men and women golfers in the world. So are they the same or are they different? And how does that translate into how far they hit it? All that and more is coming your way on this Tuesday, July 11th edition of Morning Drive. We are back right after this.